I first got interested in macular pigment research group back in 1998 when I was training to be an ophthalmologist, and what fascinated me was that simple dietary modification or supplementation could change the course of a disease that at the time had no treatment whatsoever. And evidence has shown now, after 15 years of research, that indeed the natural history of this disease can be ameliorated, can be improved upon with simple dietary supplementation.
Yeah, and you know, from my point of view, it's in addition to what we've learned and what it can do for age-related macular degeneration. I think the important thing when we speak about macular nutrition is the function and the role of macular pigment. And the macular pigments, of course, are lutein, zeaxanthin, and the central component, meso-zeaxanthin. And what we've learned from published science now is that if you can enrich macular pigment with those three carotenoids, you can enhance visual function in a very real way. And we've been able to achieve that not only in the diseased retina, but in the healthy retina. So we take people that think they've optimal vision, we've been able to enhance a visual function in areas like contrast sensitivity, glare reduction. So it's a very exciting time for this field of research.
Yes, we looked at that in two groups of people. Number one, normal people who have no eye disease whatsoever, and number two, age-related macular degeneration patients. And what we found was that the best response in terms of macular pigment augmentation, increase in macular pigment, was if the supplement formulation contained all three of macular pigment's constituent carotenoids, that is lutein, zeaxanthin, and the centrally dominant carotenoid known as meso-zeaxanthin. But what was particularly interesting was that at the end of the trial, the amount by which your macular pigment had increased was related to serum levels only of meso-zeaxanthin and not to serum levels of lutein or to serum levels of zeaxanthin. In other words, it seems that the most important determinant of macular pigment augmentation in AMD subjects is indeed serum levels of the third macular carotenoid, meso-zeaxanthin. When meso-zeaxanthin is available in commercially available supplements such as MacuHealth, and it is found in certain foods, it's found in egg yolk for example. However, the studies haven't looked deeply into its source, and because its identification and its separation from its isomer zeaxanthin is actually quite complex, and there's only 2 or 3 laboratories in the world that are geared up to do it. We're actually looking at what foods it may be in, and that's a subject of ongoing study.
And one of the other findings that we have that's related to that, and that's quite interesting, is that the theory is that we can get meso-zeaxanthin from lutein, but that requires a conversion at the retina. Now, what we identified in a recent publication in IOVS was that some individuals have what we've coined a central dip in their macular pigment profile, and we hypothesized in that study that that central dip was due to a lack of meso-zeaxanthin and maybe an inability to do that conversion. And essentially we've been able to show that if you give them the meso-zeaxanthin in the supplement form, that you can uniquely rebuild that central pigment. And then we took that a step further and tested that in terms of functionality, and we found that we were able to greatly enhance visual function in those subjects tested in that trial. So it was quite a groundbreaking finding.
On that point, we know, for example, in conditions like pernicious anemia, if you don't have an intrinsic factor in the stomach, you don't get B12 absorption. Are you positing a similar situation where individuals may be missing a certain factor which would allow them to incorporate the meso-zeaxanthin?
Precisely correct. So in other words, as I say, there's 3 carotenoids in the macula. Lutein, which is in the peripheral macula, not peripheral retina, peripheral macula. Zeaxanthin, which is in the mid-peripheral macula. And meso-zeaxanthin, which is in the very epicenter of the macula, where vision is sharpest. It is true to say that lutein is converted to meso-zeaxanthin in a large portion of people. But there are some people where their macular pigment, instead of being shaped like a typical Mount Everest mountain, has a volcanic crater in the middle. Having such a crater seems to be representative of risk for age-related macular degeneration long before disease onset. We suspect that those are precisely the people who can't convert their lutein to meso-zeaxanthin, because perhaps they don't have the enzyme required to do so. And we have shown that in people who have such an atypical volcanic dip in their macular pigment, in other words, people who are at increased risk of AMD, you can only normalize it to a normal, typical mountain like Mount Everest if you include meso-zeaxanthin in the supplement. The formulation that seems to be best is in a milligram ratio of 10-10-2. That's 10 milligrams of meso-zeaxanthin, 10 milligrams of lutein, and 2 milligrams of zeaxanthin. And that's commercially available in the United States as Macular.
And I think it's interesting because when carotenoids, we study carotenoids for a living. We enjoy them. They're very interesting compounds. And what we do know is that we do not take in enough carotenoids from a normal healthy diet. And that's now more important when we look at the ageing population. And the success that ageing has presented is in fact the challenge that we have as eye care specialists and as scientists, because we need to be able to optimise nutrition all over the body. Obviously our interest is in the eye, and we know that as you get older your macular pigment levels decrease. So to be able to enrich it with this unique formulation is something that's, we believe, very important now, and particularly now when we see the results of ARVO too as well. You know, the role for nutritional supplements, particularly in individuals that have kind of poor diets or low starting points. I think it's very interesting.
Now, what about gastrointestinal absorption? You know, this can vary. There are all sorts of gastrointestinal milieu issues. There have been a spate of studies about bacterial overgrowth and how it can affect absorption. How do you make sure that your delivery is consistent and reaches consistent blood levels?
Well, we have looked at that, and there is no competitive inhibition for absorption between the three macular carotenoids. However, as we saw in the ARVO report, if you take beta-carotene, it does inhibit, that is another carotenoid which is not found in the retina, it does inhibit absorption of lutein and zeaxanthin. In fact, those who were given beta-carotene in the ARVO 2 trial had significantly less serum concentrations of lutein and zeaxanthin. So a supplement should not contain beta-carotene. But with respect to possibility of competitive inhibition between the three macular carotenoids, that doesn't occur, because we have seen that in all patients who are supplemented, serum concentrations of all three of those constituent carotenoids rise substantially and significantly. Yeah, that's a very good question. If you augment your macular pigment with supplementation, your macular pigment rises as do serum levels. If you discontinue that supplementation, your serum levels plummet immediately. Your macular pigment levels, they go down quite rapidly over a few weeks. We did one very interesting experiment where a volunteer in the research group actually deprived himself of all carotenoids to the extent that he wouldn't even eat seasoned sausages, so no carotenoids for 6 weeks, and his macular pigment went to 0 over a 6-week period. So you do need continuous supply. It's like vitamin C, you can't store it.
And that's the thing with macular pigment, you know, it varies dramatically between individuals, and you know, so you do not have a right to have it. You have to do the right things. You have to eat healthy, and in some cases you have to definitely take a supplement. That's what we've seen. And as Professor Beatty said, you know, to keep it up there, you need to optimize all those factors and maintain it.
And you know, to put it in context, the amazing thing about macular pigment is there's 600 carotenoids in nature. There's 50 in your diet. There's 14 in your serum. But nature has taken the trouble with exquisite biological selectivity to accumulate only 3 at your macula. And their properties are, they're yellow in colour, so they filter out blue light. And it's very important to understand that it filters out the blue light before the blue light hits the photoreceptors. And the importance of that is it filters out blue light before the blue light can cause what's known as a veiling luminance. Blue light is the only visible wavelength which is scattered. Okay, that's why the sky is blue. And as a result of blue light, you get a veiling luminance over your retina which impairs contrast sensitivity. The best way to really explain this is to bring up an analogy of a barbecue. If you're at a barbecue on a Saturday afternoon and it's 3:30 and you look at the barbecue embers, you can't distinguish one ember from the other and they all look grey. 4 hours later at 7:30 when it's twilight, you can see the embers and they're the same luminance. You can see them absolutely perfectly one from the other. The reason being that during daylight, the blue light is scattered. It has scattered all over your retina, so the discriminability of objects in your field of view is increased. What macular pigment does is it filters out that blue light before the blue light hits your macula, and that improves your visibility of objects. To the extent that now baseball players are taking macular pigment supplements, because whether they're working at night, under under floodlight conditions or bright sunlight conditions, their vision improves, and that improvement, that substantial improvement in reaction time is making all the difference. So macular pigment shouldn't just be seen as something for delaying the onset or preventing the progression of age-related macular degeneration, which is now proven to do with the ARVO too, but it is also there to improve your vision under normal conditions. And I really firmly believe that macular pigment levels will, in a matter of 4 or 5 years, be absolutely standard measurements for pilots, drivers, bus drivers, train drivers, soldiers, snipers. They will all, if they want to maximize their vision, they need absolute optimum levels of this pigment in the back of the eye.
Yeah, and in summary, what we've been able to see is when you optimize that pigment at the back of the eye, when you enrich it, it's important that you measure vision in the appropriate way. And standard measures of vision are not appropriate, such as the visual acuity, to pick up the visual benefits of that global visual performance. So we've been able to see in our clinical trials, when you look at contrast sensitivity, glare disability, you can really find those effects, which correlate, by the way, very well with the subject view, so subjective visual performance.
Take-home message with macular pigment is, if you want to have the best vision you are capable of having, you need optimum levels of macular pigment. To achieve that, you need to supplement with all 3 of macular pigment's constituent carotenoids, lutein, zeaxanthin, and meso-zeaxanthin. So that's true for absolutely normal people, especially if they're working or doing recreational activities under bright light conditions. If they want to maximize their visual performance, they need to supplement. The second group of people that need to supplement, which is now proven in the ARVO study, is people who have early macular degeneration. If they want to reduce the risk of it becoming the blinding, advanced form of age-related macular degeneration, there is now firm evidence that they need to take macular pigment supplements. And the best way of achieving maximum levels, again, is to supplement with all 3 of macular pigment's carotenoids, lutein, zeaxanthin, and meso-zeaxanthin, commercially available as MacuHealth. And finally, people who are at risk of developing age-related macular degeneration. For example, people who are the offspring of, if their parents have age-related macular degeneration, they have a very good reason. If they want to delay its onset or maybe even prevent its onset altogether, they should certainly supplement with the 10-10-2 formula.
So the short summary is that, if you enrich this pigment the way we've discovered that you can create an enhanced vision in your younger years. And luckily now we know from the ARVO to protect your vision into your later years. So there's a double win here if you can achieve that.
Absolutely, toxicity studies have been done, and there's no toxicity associated with any of 3 macular pigment's carotenoids. For example, you can actually take 200 times a dose that you find in commercially available preparations without a single side effect. Again, it is eliminated from the body and it doesn't accumulate beyond what is required.
Yeah, and we've also tested this in human trials. We've done full clinical pathology assessment over a 3-year period, and we looked at every possible parameter, and we found absolutely no issues with supplementing with 22 milligrams of these carotenoids. So that has been tested.
That's a very interesting question. Only yesterday I was looking at a poster from the National Eye Institute in the US. What they showed was that if you were very heavily genetically predisposed to age-related macular degeneration, you dampened down that risk by taking supplements. So in other words, if you're pre-programmed to get the condition, it's still worth taking the supplements because you will delay its onset. So in other words, the disease is an interaction between environment and genetic background, but you can delay its onset by taking appropriate supplements. And for an age-related condition, to delay its onset is obviously very important.
Yeah, genetics are a big player here, and we've been lucky through science to learn about the risk genes, so we know what they are. But as Professor Beatty says, you have modifiable risk factors, and the most important modifiable risk factors, and now in our view, would be smoking cessation. So to stop smoking, this is a key and important message. And in addition to that, now, nutrients and nutritional supplements are a very important modifiable risk factor for this condition.